We are very proud to welcome tonight Michael Cox, professor at the London School of Economics and very old CERIS friend, as he came to lecture since the early 90s at CERIS about US foreign policy. So I would like to ask you, Michael, three questions. My first question is related to US as a superpower. Could we say that US is in decline? Will the US remain number one?
Well, there's no straightforward answer to that, Andre. There is now certainly a very strong view around the world that the unipolar moment is over. That America's economic problems, its setbacks in Iraq, problems it's facing in Afghanistan, the rise of China, the changing nature of a much more complex, interdependent world where emerging economies like Brazil, India, Indonesia, Turkey, America no longer has the control of the international agenda, no longer leads, and there are many people in the world who no longer want to follow America. In some ways, I think there's a lot of truth in that. The world is becoming more complicated. America's capacity to lead is becoming less. Its economic position in the world is clearly becoming, it is still significant, but it is not the dominant economy it once was after World War II or even 25 and 30 years ago. So I partially agree with the argument that there's a relative decline of the United States. Having said that, though, one is still very much impressed by American assets that America still possesses. Firstly, it is still by far and away the most important significant military power in the world. It is secondly the only global power in the world. It projects military power around the world in ways that no other country can do. Even some of its economic rivals in Asia want to be closely connected to America, India, Japan, even China. Really fundamentally, I don't think wishes to seek to challenge frontally, at least, the United States. Russia is no alternative to the United States. And America still has a lot of allies in the world today. And it also has, in addition, a lot of economic power. It is still the center of the world financial system. The dollar is still the universal currency. And it still has a lot of soft power, although I think that has declined since the economic crisis. If you also take power in a wider sense to mean cultural power, then if we look at the best universities in the world today, the reality is that 60% of those are to be found in the United States. Nobel Prize winners are coming out of America still. Advanced research and development is still coming out of the United States. It is still a highly attractive society to immigrants. People want to go and live there. So there's no straightforward answer to this, I think, Andre. Is it declining in a relative sense? Yes. Does it still, however, possess formidable assets which no other state in the world yet possesses and for a long time will not possess? I think the answer to that is clear, that America still possesses those assets and still has huge leverage in the international order today.
My second question will be about transatlantic relations. During the 50s, transatlantic relations were extremely important. Now we see that the US is more and much more interested in Asia. So by the end of the day, does the transatlantic relation matter at the moment?
The Cold War itself was the great moment of the transatlantic relationship. That's when Europeans and Americans were closest. There were moments of crisis in the relationship, but in the end we had a common enemy. And ever since the end of the Cold War and the collapse of the Soviet Union, we've been trying to work out what the nature of the relationship will be, because it's not going to be united by a simple threat. Economics holds us together. Values still hold us together. Institutions still hold us together, including NATO. Nonetheless, I think there are, in spite of the obvious areas of common agreement, common concern, and we are democracies, and that makes a huge difference as well. Nonetheless, there are areas where that one can see potential tensions, potential problems, and potential challenges to the traditional transatlantic relationship. We will never return to the golden age of the transatlantic relationship we knew in the Cold War, and that's good, because the Cold War's over, and that's good. Nonetheless, there are some challenges, and we have to think about those in a balanced and reasonable way. First challenge, of course, is the United States spends far more on security than the Europeans. And many Americans resent the fact that they have to do all the fighting, and indeed, in the end, as it turns out, all the killing and be killed. They think there's an uneven burden sharing, and they've argued about this certainly over Afghanistan. And that does chip away at the foundations of the security relation. It doesn't destroy it, but it hits it all the time and makes a noise, and that is a problem. Secondly, I think that America clearly has been turning its attention more towards Asia Pacific over the last 10 years, and certainly over the last 5 years. And it is in Asia Pacific they think the future of the world economy is now likely to be over the next 20, 30, 40 years. Emerging economies, particularly those in Asia, particularly China, that is going to be of such importance in the future of American economic health, of American economic development. And I think in that sense, they look at Europe in the current crisis and think, well, Europe's very big, it's very wealthy, but it's got a long way to go over the next few years to get out of the crisis. And so for the foreseeable future, it is in Asia and the emerging economies we're going to see growth. And that's why we have to, therefore, depend less on our European partners economically and more on emerging economies, particularly those, but not only those in Asia. I think the third challenge to the relationship is that Americans themselves, I think, are very pragmatic people. But one thing that held the transatlantic relationship together for a very long time, and it's not that Europeans are becoming unpopular or Americans are hostile to Europe. They're not. That just is not the issue. But in a way, there is generational change taking place in America. You know, the old generation after World War II had fought World War II together. They had liberated Europe. And then there was the Cold War in Europe where Americans and Europeans were West Europeans were bound together by the threat of the Soviet Union, by the Warsaw Pact. A new generation is emerging which didn't go through those experiences, you know, who didn't think that Europe is as important. You know, that kind of focus on Europe, I think, is shifting psychologically. And new generations now, you know, you look at the changing demography of America, more and more people of Hispanic origin, more and more people of Asian origin. And as America changes in terms of its constituent ethnicity, then I think, again, that is going to partially, not undermine, but it is going to change the ways that a traditional European-oriented American Europeans, Irish Americans, Italian Americans, German Americans, British Americans, if you like, that generation, I think, is going to become less important. And as it becomes less important, I think that is going to also alter the character of that relationship.
So my last question is related to the coming presidential elections. Do you believe that Obama is likely to be re-elected and to have a second term?
Well, Andre, that's an impossible question which I refuse to answer because I don't know the answer, because nobody knows the answer. But that tells us something. What it tells us now is that it's too close to call. There are many things working against Obama. His traditional liberal supporters are disillusioned and disappointed. Others who voted for Obama in 2008 are floating voters. They're not traditional Democrats, and they could float towards the Republicans. It's possible. And he seems to have let a lot of people down, and of course the American economy is still hurting in lots of ways. So there are problems for Obama, and I don't think anybody is going to put a lot of money on Obama winning in 2012. And moreover, if the Republicans, as I think they almost certainly will, elect Mitt Romney as their presidential candidate, he will be a strong opponent, by far and away the strongest Republican opposition that the Republicans can put forward against Obama, no doubt about it. And as I've said before, he's an intelligent, able person, he's articulate, he's not very exciting as a speaker, that is for sure, but he's very reliable, he's a businessman, strong religious background, strong religious values, etc. Although he's a Mormon, that may play slightly against him. Where I think Obama has some real possibilities, though, the economy is beginning to turn up. One. And I think he will do everything he can to make sure the economy continues to improve over the next few months. Anything he can do to get growth up, unemployment down, he will do. Secondly, Obama is the president of the United States and will exploit the advantages of being an incumbent president. And he will exploit all the resources at his disposal to make sure that he is the second-term African-American president, Democratic president. Thirdly, Obama, he has disillusioned liberals, but he has been tough on national security. On Afghanistan, he's been pretty tough. He's put in more ground troops. They may withdraw one day, but he's put in more ground troops. There's been more drone strikes in Pakistan. And of course, Osama bin Laden was eliminated under Obama. And even his military cuts, which have been announced over the last few weeks, of early part of 2012, late 2000, really will not be so significant as to make the Democrats vulnerable on national security. They cannot be accused, as many Democrats in the past have been accused, of being weak on national security. So I think a combination of a reviving economy, utilizing the power of the presidency, incumbency, and then thirdly, strength on national security, which has disillusioned liberals, but that may mean Americans will feel safe with him. And for that reason, therefore, I think he still has a very good chance of becoming a second-term president. But again, as I said, I'm not going to put a lot of money on it.